I think, all right, now that we're recording and we have a quorum, we're going to move forward. The first thing is to take a look at the agenda. Did anybody have any proposed changes or concerns with the agenda? I don't see any hands or anybody chiming in. All right, let's move on to approving the meeting summary for November 14th. Had a few changes made, edits made to it. People have a chance to review that. Everybody happy with it? Is there a motion to approve? Anybody?
I so move.
All right, Oliver moved to approve. Is there any discussion? Or is there a second?
I'll second.
Gary, second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, raise your hand or say aye or whatever you want to do.
Aye, yahoo!
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Any abstentions? Looks like we're good to go. All right, let's move on to approving the January 13th meeting summary. Any corrections people caught? Or I'll take a motion to approve. Anything? How about a motion?
I'll move.
Steve moved to approve. A second?
Second.
All right, moved and seconded by Stephen and Barry. Any further discussion or corrections? All those in favor, raise their hand or say aye. Anybody opposed? Abstentions? Those are passed also. Updates and announcements. I don't have any updates or announcements other than I somehow ended up in charge this morning because Chris is out of town. So good luck with that. Anybody else have important announcements for the good of the order? I guess we can move on to public comment then. I don't see anybody from the public online. I don't know if there's anybody in the room. Is there any public member here that would like to make comments? As everybody knows, we allow 2 minutes for public comments, or you certainly can submit longer comments in writing. Anybody here?
Yes, we've got Tom Smith. Go ahead, Tom.
Tom's a committee member.
Yeah.
Oh, Tom, sorry, you were.
I couldn't
You
get my
were-
audio or video up the other way, so can I stay on as is?
Yeah, you're good. Sorry about that, Tom.
All right. So it looks like there isn't any public here today, at least none that wants to speak.
I'll just note we do have Alan and Kaya, but I do not believe they would like to speak, but we'll note that in the summary.
Okay. I think we're ready to move on to a review of the work plan, and so I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
All right. Thank you, Carl, and thanks for helping with today's meeting and subbing in for us while Chris is out. Appreciate that. Yes, I'm gonna just kick us off with our typical agenda item here to situate us in where we've been and where we're going and the objectives of our meeting today. If you look at page 21 of your meeting packet, you'll see our overall work plan, which we've been including in our meeting packets for the last couple of months, again, just to help orient us. And Melanie, if you could pull that up on the screen just briefly before we dive in here. So while Melanie's doing that, I'll just verbally note today is our 8th task force meeting. What we've been working on kind of in the background to these meetings is working on initial analysis of the data from the community survey, which was of course closed in January. The Triangle team is working on that analysis, and we'll have more updates for you likely at our next meeting. more just big picture results of that survey. So that's something you can look forward to. And then simultaneously, we are in the drafting process of the plan. And I just want to have this timeline up for 1 second. You know, Melanie's screen is getting warmed up on this Monday morning. Perfect. Thank you. You zoom in for us, Mel. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so just right, you can see we're in February. Up at the top there, Melanie has the draft plan components section of the timeline. So you can see that the Triangle team, including Dave, has been working on the background and policy section. Of course, we've already made progress on the outline and the forest resilience definition. And then, like I noted, we're also working on this community values section as well. And those are pieces of the plan that you all can expect more updates from. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the review cycle is going to look like. And that's really where I'd like to spend the majority of my time talking with you all today, is just talking through the details of what that plan drafting process is going to look like. So thank you, Melanie, for showing us this big picture. I think you can pull that down, and I'll just spend a minute talking about the plan drafting process in a bit more detail. So we're at a stage now where we're starting to get some meat on the bones on this plan, and in conversations with Chris, as well as our strategic advisor on the project. So that's another member of our Triangle team who has lots of experience developing plans such as this in a similar collaborative format. We've decided on a recommended approach to this drafting process, being that the best way we think we can move forward is to establish a review committee who will act as the initial reviewer of the plan following Dave's drafting with the materials that, of course, we've been working on as a group for the last couple of months. And I'm going to talk through the details of this, but I just wanted to spend a minute thinking a little bit bigger picture about why we're making that recommendation. It's really critical, of course, that we get all of your expertise and your feedback. That's why you all are on this task force. And we're a big group. I think we all know that. And managing line by line edits of a group of our size on our timeline, just as a reminder, we're working toward a September deliverable deadline to Whatcom County Council. So that's when the plan is due. Managing line by line edits on that timeline is just not realistic given that timeline. So I think this review committee and the process that I'll outline for you all today is a way to incorporate your expertise in a realistic format. So if you could pull up our little process graphic, Melanie, I can talk through that, and we'll have plenty of time to chew on this and answer any questions you all have. So just super simply, this is a graphic to just demonstrate what I'm talking about here, right? So number one, plan section drafted. So this is the process that we're already in, right? Dave is taking the really good work that you all have been doing in this group and in your subcommittees and been working on our select plan sections. So that's happening, right? And he's working with us, Melanie and myself, as well as Chris, to do that. So what we're proposing is the next step in the process is that the document goes to this review subcommittee. And these are a handful of folks, and we can talk about composition in a second, but these are a handful of folks who can contribute more detailed edits, right? Who can work in tracked changes, and they have the time and the interest to do that. Then from that stage, we, the Triangle team, which includes Dave, would incorporate edits from that review committee. And the output of that would just be a revised draft document. Once we have that, then the revised draft document would go to the full task force. So we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to see the document. And this is a process that would facilitate everyone being able to see the document. We're just proposing full task force review kind of at that secondary review stage once the review subcommittee has done more in-depth revisions. So the full task force would have a chance to review these sections of the plan and provide more big picture feedback. So this would not be line by line tracked changes. We're talking about identifying major concerns related to content rather than syntax to make best use of everyone's time. And then from there, the document would go back to the Triangle team, and we would incorporate kind of those second round edits into, the final draft of those sections. And I'll just note this is showing kind of one sequence of drafting, but we anticipate giving the plan to the review committee and to you all in chunks, right? So this isn't going to happen once. This is going to happen a handful of times as Dave is working to make progress on the draft sections of the plan. So essentially there's kind of a repeat button at the end of this graphic. The final thing I'll say before I pause for questions is just a little more detail on who this review committee would be. Our recommendation, and we're open to thoughts on this, is that the subcommittees could perhaps nominate a member of their team to be a part of this review committee, or if someone is particularly interested, they could volunteer and communicate with their subcommittee to do it that way. And this would also we're hoping, make best use of the time that you all have, because folks who are particularly interested and have available time would be able to kind of volunteer for that more active role. So ultimately, the review subcommittee would be, between 4 and perhaps maybe 6 members if there's a subcommittee who feels strongly about having multiple folks from their subcommittee on the review committee. So flexibility there. I think what I'll do is I'll pause and see what questions you all have, because I just talked at you for quite some time. Okay, Oliver, I see your hand.
Yeah, I think both ways of selecting the review subcommittee are valid. However, I do have a slight preference for people that have experience and a wealth of knowledge in the subject matter and who have the time would be particularly valuable on that review committee.
Thanks, Oliver. That makes a lot of sense. Carl, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was wondering, and maybe this is a question for Dave, if you have kind of a sample report that you're using as a template, because I don't know what this report's going to look like. Are we going to try to prove everything we say? If we're talking about changing something, are we going to have footnotes that reference scientific studies that support that change?
I mean, a typical way we can do it is to have a list of the comments, and then after each comment, provide a response. this comment was accepted or this comment was partly accepted, and then indicate exactly how it was done. I think that would, to me, that's clearer than doing a whole bunch of track changes within documents.
Yeah, that makes sense for reviewing the report. I was just wondering, I don't have a vision of what the report itself is going to look like. Are we
Oh.
going to try to back up recommendations that are in the report with scientific studies through footnotes or appendixes or something?
It's a really interesting comment because I don't think we've actually discussed that, but I defer to Kate and Melanie maybe for some comments on that.
Yeah, Carl, it's a good point for discussion with this group. I think that's something that we would need to factor in we have some examples that we've referenced, right? That don't have footnotes or references for every objective and goal and action, right, that are being formed. There may be some sections of the plan where that would be more relevant, but I don't think it would be, at least from the from similar reports that we've referenced, that it would be like a heavy part of the plan itself. But that's something that, we're certainly open to ideas and feedback. So if you have thoughts on that, we'd really welcome them from everybody.
Okay. Stephen? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thanks. I would, I suppose as an academic, just favor more rather than less documentation, but that's something for the task force to decide. But the other question is how this fits with the timeline of what we're doing, because subcommittees are still 1 or 2 meetings away from finalizing the objectives, I think. And how does that process in the subcommittees affect Dave's timeline for stage 1 of the plan?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that's why we, right, have been spending time at each of our meeting kind of getting into our context of our timeline with this work back plan, as we like to call it. We're going to talk more about the objectives. Melanie is going to lead us through a bit of an exercise with what we have for you all today. But to answer your question more big picture, Stephen, the content that is coming out of this group, right, and ultimately your subcommittees, is the vast majority of the content that goes into the plan. And at this point, we've been able to make pretty good progress with the goals that we've outlined and agreed to with this group, as well as kind of more background policy and research sections that Dave's been able to accomplish with the insights of this group, but a bit more independently, right? So those chunks of the plan have already been drafted because we've been able to make progress on them. In the future, as if we run into kind of timeline delays with what we can accomplish with this group, it does have an impact on our timeline for completing the plan, because you all are truly, the brain behind the author of the plan and those major chunks. And Melanie, is there add anything if I missed anything?
That was really well said, and I'll be just maybe a little bit more direct and say that we're falling a little behind, and we're hoping that we can try to keep things moving with the objectives development. I'll talk more about that when we get to that bit, but really, the hope is that this review committee would be separate from your subcommittees. So we recognize that that's a little bit of additional work, which is why I think the points about having the time and interest to participate is really key. We recognize everyone's really busy, and it seems like, time is a constraint for all, and we don't have a lot of flexibility in our timeline for this work. And September is really is when it needs to be completed. So we're doing our best to try to keep us on track and keep things moving. And so we're asking that we try to prioritize the meetings that are scheduled and help us do our part in sticking to the timeline that we've laid out.
Could you say more definitely that each subcommittee's got one more meeting to finalize their objectives, period? Rather than these sort of vague generalities that you've been delivering the last couple of minutes. I think, a hard deadline is a motivator for people.
Sure, absolutely. We're going to talk about the objectives in a minute, so I'll move on to that when we've wrapped up this review committee discussion. I want to make sure there's no more questions or comments related to that.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands, so in the interest of being very specific, right? Your next steps is to work with your subcommittees to identify who will be the representative or representatives if you feel there are multiple folks or there are multiple folks who are interested in participating in the review committee. And we would love to know who those people are in the next 2 weeks. This will all be, in your action items from this meeting. So you don't need to remember exactly timeline and dates right now, but that's what we're looking to achieve so that we can follow up with those people and get them going on reviewing these first couple sections of the plan. Does that make sense? Yeah, Oliver.
How does that 2-week schedule fall with scheduled subcommittee meetings? What I'm getting at, do some subcommittees need to schedule a meeting to discuss about representatives on the review team, or are all subcommittees meeting within that 2-week time frame?
I would love to leave that to you all. I think if you all as subcommittees feel like you need to meet to talk this through, then we encourage you to do that so that you can follow up with those names. If you all feel like it's something that can be completed over email and you don't have a meeting scheduled, that's great too. Yeah, really just looking to empower you all to make that decision.
I will just say that the Climate Informed Forest Management Subcommittee is meeting on Friday, and we can certainly incorporate that into the meeting.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I think I'll hand it back to you, Melanie.
Excellent. Thank you all for the great feedback so far. What we're going to do next is, over the course of the next hour or so, is I first want to go take us back and review what our shared definitions are of goals, objectives, actions, and critical threats. It's been some time since we looked at that, and we've had some new members since then, so I thought it would be worth revisiting as we're in this critical juncture right now of forming our objectives and hopefully moving on to threats and actions. So we're going to do a little bit of review, and that will include some examples. And then from there, I will introduce our objective discussion and what I'm hoping we can accomplish with the remaining of our meeting today. So just a reminder, our goals are what we want to achieve. You all did a really great job of forming those goals, and so we have really clear targets of what we want to achieve from this plan. The objectives are the how we will achieve them, and then we form specific actions to take to meet those objectives. And our threats are what we need to overcome in order to meet those objectives. I wanted to put this up on the screen. This was in your meeting packet, so you should all have handy reference to this. If you find that it's useful, I encourage you to bring this up during your subcommittee discussions if you feel like you're getting stuck on defining your objectives or identifying actions when we get to that piece, I think it can just be really helpful to reference this graphic and have it open during your subcommittee discussions. Yes, Oliver.
Takes forever to get to the mute button. Anyway, just a couple points of note. It seems to me there needs to be 2 feedback loops on this graphic between identifying critical threats and defined objectives, at least, because it seems to me that it's difficult to set goals and objectives without having an idea of what the critical threats are. And then under the definition of threats, what factors have led to current conditions? Shouldn't it also be future conditions as well? Because this is climate change resilience plan, or climate change major goal of the plan. And so it seems to me that it should be, we should insert future conditions as well.
Thanks for that comment, Oliver. This is a more general, I guess, graphic. I'll say it's not tailored specifically to this plan. Your point is well taken, and I'd encourage everybody to, when we discuss threats, to think about current and future conditions. Thanks, Oliver. Okay. So I thought it would be helpful by looking, oh, Ellen, I see a real hand. Go ahead.
My question is, when we start talking about planning targets and measurable objectives, do you think that the objectives, let's just go under climate informed management, are measurable?
That's part of what we will discuss today, and I'd love everybody's feedback on that. So that's a really key piece, is that these objectives are measurable, and that's something that we'll be looking for when we review them as a group in just a little bit. So thanks for the foresight there. And I'm hoping these examples will help inform that discussion. So the first example I have on the screen, this is from the Washington Shrub Steppe Restoration and Resiliency Initiative. This is something that Triangle was hired to help support, and our strategic advisor on this project was the facilitator for this process. A really intensive effort, and has followed this process to come up with goals, objectives, actions, and they reviewed critical threats. So I thought I would share some examples on the screen of the outcomes of this process. Here's an example goal they had. So human communities in the shrub steppe landscape are better protected, prepared, and resilient to wildland fire, engaged in shrub steppe conservation, and economically viable. So one of the objectives associated with this goal was to reduce the present day adjusted dollar amount of damage, number of structures burned, and families displaced resulting from wildland fires in the shrub steppe landscape below the 10-year average by 5% for 10 consecutive years beginning in 2029. So really specific and measurable objective here. And you can envision how this could just initially say reduce the present day adjusted dollar amount, like period here. But this last bit is what makes this objective really trackable, right? You can measure whether or not it was successful because there's some specificity in the time and the amount of the reduction here. So without this qualifying language, this isn't a measurable objective. Just getting into another example, same goal, another objective, ensure all human communities in the shrub steppe landscape are engaged in, aware of, and planning for fire resistance, resilience, and recovery by 2029. So again, you could have this just the first part, ensure all human communities in the shrub steppe landscape are engaged in, aware of, planning. This by 2029 is what makes it measurable, right? We've got a time constraint around it. Moving on to the next phase, which will be developing actions, you can start to see how these nest under one another. So here's that same goal. The objective we just looked at, ensure all human communities in the shrub steppe landscape are engaged in, aware of, and planning for fire resistance, resilience, and recovery by 2029. Here are the actions to take. Facilitate consistent coordination among all entities implementing fire planning and response. Establish a work group to coordinate fire detection and reporting between agencies. So here's some clear examples of goal, what the objective underneath that goal is, and what the actions to take might be. Here's another example from, this is from the, oops, sorry. My image fell out, but this is from the King County 30-year strategic plan. So the goal in this plan was maintain healthy working forests and prevent forest fragmentation and the conversion of working forests to non-forested uses. The objective here was to increase participation in incentive programs by forest landowners. I would push back and say that there could be some more specificity to this objective. Ellen, I think I see, is that a hand?
It is, but
Yeah.
I don't want to.
That's okay, go ahead.
Well, I guess it comes back to a question for either Dave or Chris, who's not here, is that in our original goal on climate-informed management, Whatcom County forests are resilient to climate change and provide healthy and sustainable ecosystem services. How do we define that? How do we actually measure that? Is it based on the water that is provided today to support the community? Or I don't know, maybe Dave can shed some light on how do we, I mean, is it resilient today by today's standards, but we know climate change is going to increase damage in the future? How do we actually define it? And so that we can measure?
Stephen, did you have a response to that?
Yeah,
that
I've
question?
been thinking, and following up on Ellen's reference to the Climate Informed Forest Management Subcommittee, your examples have made the objectives quantifiable and measurable, but not the goals. Is that right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, okay. So if we go to just the first objective, just to take it at random, in the climate informed forest management, it says reduce damage from wildfires, pests, and diseases. So we would need to have a measurement of how much damage, perhaps in acres, perhaps in dollars, has been done to wildfires, pests, and diseases over a specified period of time, say 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and then set some sort of a percentage goal of reduction. And I would like to ask other people if that's actually a feasible thing to do that measurement and figure out what percentage we ought to set as a benchmark. Is it possible in the time frame? Maybe Dave has a better idea.
Just to make sure I'm clear on the question, are you saying, is it possible to define those targets for writing the objective, or is the objective
yes,
itself?
that's-
Okay.
That's right.
Well, Dave, if you have thoughts on that, you're welcome to share them, and I can share my thoughts as well.
Yeah, well, in general, a lot of these things are subjective, of course, right? You
Yeah.
know, so I guess I would turn it back to the subcommittees and ask them to at least take a run at trying to do some of these definitions, and to be as quantitative as you think might be appropriate or feasible in the context of a kind of, high level plan like this. So I'd love to see folks take a run at it and do some quantification where possible.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Barry?
Yeah, just looking at all these, I've gone through millions of plans with goals and policies and objectives and actions. And the analogy I can see here real clearly is in Whatcom County, the flood plan. So in the flood plan, first thing you figure out people, we've allowed them to build into the floodplain. Some are farmers, which makes sense, and they can elevate a lot of their things, protect hazardous waste from being carried away in the flood, and protect their animals on pads and that sort of thing. But the other part of it is preventing more people from getting in harm's way. And so the idea is that there's buyout programs. And so the first thing I think is avoidance in dealing with these impacts. And if we can prevent them from happening, we don't have to worry so much. I mean, the forest will burn, but people's homes won't burn. So the first goal should be to actually manage and limit, people being in harm's way. And that would mean, and people don't like to hear this, maybe there's areas you should not be building. Areas that if you're on a steep slope in a fire, high fire area, you don't allow more people to build up there, because people, what we're trying to deal with is climate change, which is runaway. We started studying this 25 years ago and proved it, and we've delayed it this long, so now we have a much impossible problem as far as I'm concerned. We can't control the external, national, international. All we can control is our regional little area here, which means we should really focus on what the county can do and what we can do with private landowners and DNR in particular, but also the federal. And I would kind of give up on the federal force at this point. We're not, with this administration, you're not going to get anywhere. But we could at least come up with a good plan for, if you really wanted to preserve this, the health of these forests, here's what it would look like. Now, we're still on the DNR land, you're still connected to, producing money for schools in particular. And so until that gets decoupled, that's just going to be a gigantic problem. And it's tried, politicians have tried for decades to separate that, and they still haven't got there. And so that's just a given. What we can do is actually come up with a plan for county lands and say, okay, what is the biodiversity here? What is the wildlife? What is the water contribution? What is the air contribution? What's all the things that our own forest that we have control over, land use control over, we can do with it? Because, everything else is basically, tell you the truth, it's not going to get done in any time fast. We can identify, and the obstacles are political, the obstacles are financial, the obstacles are social. And so that's a massive thing to try to turn around. If we can just actually focus on what we have here regionally and come to a good way of working with landowners. There are many landowners that love to have their forests out there, and they're maintaining them, doing a really good job. And we can do selective logging in the county forest area, because we're going to need to generate some money to take care of it, basically. And do these studies. A lot of these studies have been done in biodiversity and in the connection of essentially things that we don't even think about right now, like mycelium, and how when you take out a forest or clear cut it, it damages the supporting network underneath it that makes that forest way more productive, 10 times more carbon reserve than just the wood itself, and much more resilient to climate change. And so unless we're doing that kind of stuff, there's no point in doing this. I just don't see that we're going to get anywhere, and it's going to mean anything. So why don't we focus on our own regional area, and you can still say, okay, we'll look at the DNR land, but until some of these things get fixed, you can't really make a change. And that's the obstacle. That's my 2 cents. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks for sharing. I think, I heard you use the word obstacle and reference some things that really tie into those critical threats, which is what we'll talk about next. So I think you're getting at some important pieces related to prioritization and how to focus these efforts. So thank you. I think that's relevant. Oliver, then Tom, then Dave.
Yeah, having prepared many plans in the past. That's my experience base. Oftentimes with objectives, if we're talking about the goal of having quantified objectives is rather than quantify the objective, but have an associated performance standard for each objective. And that might be a consideration because that way it allows the objective to not be encumbered by, a quantity, but the performance standard that's associated with that objective does include the performance standards that are being used to determine whether those objectives are effectively met or not.
Yeah, Oliver, I think for some of these, it's easy to put, a percentage or a time constraint, but I think the idea is that there's some performance standard, some metric, because even what you're referencing, right, would have something that you're measuring against. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I just sometimes it's easier to separate the performance standard from the rather than encumbering the objective with that performance standard. It's really a moot point, but that's what are most comfortable with is having a specific performance standard or standards associated with the objective that aren't actually written into the objective.
Just written outside of it. Okay. I think that's that type of like formatting question could come after the content is there. Do you agree with that? As long as I think the goal is to form objectives that at least have that performance standard, right, measurable target that we're referencing built into it as we're forming them.
Yeah, that works.
Okay. Thanks, Oliver. Great comment. Tom?
Yeah, thanks. I have more and more comments developing as I've been hearing excellent input from folks. I agree that with your shrub step community example of goals and objectives, there was a pretty clear baseline identified because you could easily go back and say, find how many homes are lost, how many dollars of damage is done. That's a good baseline. And so I think some of these tasks we're working on, we could probably establish that. The baseline of how resilient our current forests in Whatcom County are, that's a little bit tougher to establish. Based on the fire regimes we have here and the catastrophic nature of the fires, yeah, how resilient is what we have today, and how will that change in the future? That's going to be a tough one. Barry mentioned a couple things. He talked. First example was about ag lands. They can build infrastructure above the floodplain. And he also mentioned, buyouts, and that would be an incentive. If people can opt out of harvesting or whatever through incentives, that's the way to go. He next talked about county prohibiting development in certain areas. And I do know when I was involved in forest practices a number of years ago, after the county did their alluvial fan hazard study and identified high, medium, and low risk areas, I believe they passed an ordinance, or were in the process of it, to prohibit construction on these areas in high risk zones. And I do know that there was a lawsuit, and they gave up on that process. So I think trying to regulate what people can do and where is a really tough row to hoe. So yeah, I think anytime we can use incentives rather than regulation, we might get better compliance with that. I guess I'll let it go like that. But I think basically, yeah, if we can establish baselines and move on from there, we'd be able to get better objectives and metrics to work off of, and then also track through time. That's all.
Oh, thanks so much, Tom. Great comments. Dave, and then Barry, and then I'm going to move us forward so that we have some time for our activity and to talk more about the objectives. Go ahead, Dave, then Barry.
Yeah, just a very quick comment relative to Barry's earlier comment. And the first part of that comment was to perhaps try to connect some aspects of the Forest Resilience Plan to existing programs, plans, initiatives, and so forth of the county and perhaps other organizations. I think it will be much more meaningful if we can drill down into some specificities rather than keep this to, 30,000 foot level. That's all.
Thanks, Dave. Go ahead, Barry. Oh, you're muted, Barry.
Yeah, and in response to the comment made about county's ability to prohibit development, I was the state lead on that alluvial fan study, and the resulting regulations that prohibit development on alluvial fans. What I think you're might be getting confused with is that there was also an effort to look at outside of the actual alluvial fan, and that if you have a torrent, debris torrent, it comes down, it'll go through the alluvial fan and potentially off the other end of it into areas that are not on the alluvial fan, they're on the edge. So if it's like it was an earthquake fault, you don't want people you can prohibit people building on an earthquake fault, but then you can say, okay, what kind of a buffer and what kind of structure do they have to build if they're building closer to that? It's the same thing about the floodway in the floodplain. The floodway is where all the water comes, where it's supposed to come anyway, in a big flood. And if anything in there, you're gone. And the public has a right to say, look, you can't be an idiot and build in an area that we are going to have to spend millions of dollars pulling you out in a flood and then allow you to build back in there. Nah, your basically land gets condemned and you have to get out, and we can find a help in a different place. But you can't be, it's just like the police power of the county is supported by the Constitution, and it's been held up by the Constitution for all these years. And that's how that works. So the county has full authority to say, here's a public threat and safety, and we're not going to let you build out over the water in a hazardous condition. So it's prohibited, and it sticks. So just to make clear, that's where that came from.
Thanks, Barry. I am going to move us forward. I just had a couple more slides I wanted to show and talk a little bit more about the critical threats piece and how that will help informing the actions and will be the next focus of your work in subcommittees. So just to finish out this example, this is another resource for you all to ground examples right in the work that we're doing. So the objective was to increase participation in incentive programs. Again, I think this objective would be improved by having some metrics associated with it. And then the actions there, one of the actions, provide forest stewardship planning assistance, including information on incentive programs to actively manage forests. So just, again, thinking about this stepwise nature of the goals, objectives, and actions. So thinking about critical threats, again, these are what need to be addressed in order to achieve objectives. So what potentially is standing in the way or what needs to be overcome. And these help to inform the action. So when you look at the objective and you think about challenges associated with meeting those objectives, you're forming actions based on some of these threats and overcoming some of these threats. So I just put some ideas in here. The way these are framed can look really different depending on the scope and scale of the plans that are being developed. And so this is something that we're really open to feedback on how you want to structure these, but our recommendation is that we're forming these not specific to any one objective statement or even goal statement. These are things that you're looking at pretty holistically when you're thinking about forest resilience in Whatcom County, and they're influencing multiple threats could be influencing actions, right, in different objectives and goal statements. So this is something that would not be specific to each objective statement or even each goal statement, but is kind of more all-encompassing across across the scale and scope of this plan. Any questions before I move us forward and explain what we're going to do next? Yeah, Stephen.
Maybe this is probably too late, but it seems like this should have come before any goals or any objectives or anything else. It's good that it's happening, but it seems like why didn't we start out with this? Because otherwise we wouldn't need a plan.
Can you say more about that last sentence? We wouldn't need a plan.
Yeah, if there were no threats, then what would we be planning for? You know, we're talking about resilience. So resilience is defined as the ability to continue to exist in the face of disturbances. And so these critical threats in ecosystem terms are disturbances that are happening in a present, or as you said earlier in the meeting, future threats. And I suppose I'm just, you know, kind of wondering here. There isn't really any answer because this needs to be there, but seems like it should have been the start.
I think there's some merit to that, Stephen. The way I look at it is once you have your objectives, these are the things that are that need to be addressed in order to achieve them. So it helps target a little bit, even though it is more holistic, right? You are focused on the threats to the objectives that you've identified. So is that helpful in thinking?
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, Oliver?
thank you.
Yeah, Steve was more succinct than I was, but that was kind of my point about the process graphic. That there, I agree that threats should be identified at the very beginning of this process, but then there should be kind of a feedback loop between threat and defining objectives. You don't know if without knowing the threats, it's hard to come up with objectives that or the full range of objectives. And so I'm basically agreeing with what Steve. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks for that. I hear you. I hear your points, and I'm hoping we can still, move forward. And I hope that you are thinking about some of these things as you're forming your objectives, and that they're in conversation. And the process of formalizing them, I think, hopefully, is helpful at this stage as you've targeted your focus a little bit on some of these objectives. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're a bit over time, so I'm going to restructure the activity based on the time we have left, which is about 30 minutes, a little bit over 30 minutes. We need some time for wrap. So we have developed another mural with the draft objectives that we saw as of February 2nd. And I recognize, based on some feedback that we've heard from you all and some emails that we've seen, that subcommittees are still in the process of talking through and finalizing these objective statements. Stephen, to your point earlier, we do need to get to a point where we say, okay, these are ready for full group discussion so that we can move forward. I think we've got a lot of really great insight into these, which is really helpful, and we have a timeline that we need to stick to. So what I would propose, since I think it was challenging last month for some of the subcommittees to meet, and it does look like the subcommittees have really great draft objectives already in formation, that we spend the next 30 minutes with you all spending some really thoughtful time reviewing those objectives and going through a similar exercise that we did with the goal statements, where you note ones where you feel like this is a good objective statement, it looks good as is, I don't think there's any further comments or any further edits needed to this, or you note some that do need a little bit more attention and you can provide some suggestions as to how to reframe them. I think just pointing back to Ellen's comment, really thinking about how to make these specific and measurable would be really helpful. And then you all in your next subcommittee meetings can focus on the ones that this group flagged as needing a little bit more attention, so that when we come back at our next meeting, we have a really efficient discussion. And my goal would be that we are actually able to approve all of our objectives so that we can move on. And I recognize that you all need a little bit more time in subcommittees to get there. And I'm hoping that using this time that we all have together will expedite that process. So Kate, if you could put the link to the mural in the chat. For anyone who is not able to access Mural or has difficulties navigating it, I'm going to go through a how-to again, because I know not everybody was present for our goal discussion. Also, you all have the list of the goal statements in your, or objective statements, excuse me, in your meeting packet, and you can go through this exercise using pen and paper or whatever works best for you. We would just really love to see that feedback so that we can make sure that it gets to subcommittee members and we have it for our records. So that is an option available to you. So I will share my screen with the mural and just talk through briefly as a reminder of how to navigate this. We've got a number of different work zones, and so there's a lot of zooming in and out that you'll probably find helpful.
It looks like we have to create an account at Mural. Is that right?
You should not have to create an account. You should be able to join as a guest. I see a few folks joining. Are you seeing that option, Stephen?
Yeah,
Okay, great. So I'm going to zoom in here. Just this has the instructions. So below each draft goal and associated objective statements, you have dots and stickies. The green dot means this is good to go. I approve of it as written. The yellow dot indicates that this is an objective statement and it's relevant, but it needs some revisions. And if you are assigning a yellow dot to something, it would be helpful if you use these purple stickies to indicate what a revision might look like. And then an orange dot indicates that this is actually reading more like an action as opposed to an objective, so we should save it for future discussion. So the idea is that you will review all of these objective statements, and a colored sticky, you should be assigning one of these three colors to every objective statement that you're reviewing. And anytime you are recommending revisions, you have a little purple sticky that includes some notes or even a potential rewrite or rewording of the objective statement. If you feel like there's an objective statement that you'd like to add, you can use those light blue stickies to do so. And if you run out of stickies, there's more on the far left. And again, if you are having trouble accessing the mural and prefer to do this like on pen and paper using your meeting packet, that works for us. Just note, you know, these sentiments and any suggested edits on paper as corresponding to each of the objective statements.
Say, Melanie, where is the button to join this? I don't see anything here.
It's in the Zoom chat, Barry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jen?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it might be helpful to hear from each subcommittee first on how far they've gotten through these objectives. Just thinking, you know, half hour where best to spend my time. If somebody just started, you know, I'd rather focus on something that they feel pretty good about.
Sure, I think that's really helpful. Would you be willing to do that for the stewardship and land use subcommittee, Jen?
Yeah, so speaking of, it's pretty much Abe, Trevor, and I, and that was it. So we are very much in drafting phase on this front and haven't had our full committee meeting yet.
Thanks, Jen. How about climate-informed management?
We are halfway done. We have a full list, but the first half is pretty much gone over and approved, but without the quantification or specific goal of specific targets that we talked about today. The second half is suggested, and different people are making different comments and so forth, and we hope to finish those on Friday.
Okay. Thanks, Stephen. How about forest management and coordination? Anybody from the forest management and coordination subcommittee?
Yeah, this is Russ.
Hi, Russ.
I sent in before rewording on the wildland fire goal, but I didn't see that reflected here. So I think we're meeting later this week or next week, I forget, but we haven't met since our last meeting, since our last large group meeting.
Thanks, Russ, for the update. Forest industry and economics.
This is Carl. It looks like most of our members are missing, and I missed the last subcommittee meeting, so I can't really give an update. Oliver, did you attend? Well, I know these objectives have been kind of hatched since November or December. We worked on them a little bit. I missed the last meeting, so I don't know how far along the group thinks they are, but certainly we need to return to them and try to build in some metrics. Although looking at all these objectives, that's true with most all of them, I think.
Yeah, so before I call on you, Oliver, I think just encouraging folks to think about the metrics. And I know that that's something that requires some careful consideration and thought. And I think that if the group has suggestions and insights that they want to share and add as comments to some of these draft objective statements, that will really help when the subcommittees are able to meet to get these into a place where they are more specific and measurable, and we feel good about the status of them. So I agree, Carl, with that insight that many of these could use some additional language to make them more specific and measurable, and that would be a helpful use of time right now as folks are reviewing, is to identify that and make some suggestions.
Just a quick question before you move on, Melanie, about the mural. Is this something that you can leave open so people can work on it for the rest of the day?
Yes.
Or the rest of the week?
Yes, you read my mind. So I'm hearing that there's some subcommittee meetings this Friday. Is anybody meeting before this Friday? Doesn't sound like it. So what I would say is please do spend some time in this mural. We've got the rest of the meeting now for you all to work, and we'll stay online and answer any questions, and we can have some discussions as long as that's not too distracting for folks as you're trying to work. And I would ask that everybody spend some time reviewing this before the subcommittees are meeting this Friday and beyond, but it sounds like the first one is this Friday, so that everyone has provided some insight and feedback prior to subcommittee discussion. Does that work for folks' schedules? Seeing some head nods.
Yeah, it's better than trying to do it all in the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, well, is everybody able to either access the mural or work on this independently? If you have any challenges, raise your hand. Yep, I hear somebody.
I can't figure this out.
Can't figure it out, Barry. Okay.
Yeah, I know, and I can't shrink it so I can get back to other things like the chat. And so if I could have a little help on this,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Yeah, no problem. Are you able to access the link to the mural?
Yeah, I'm in the mural.
You're in the
and
mural.
I'm the sheep down there. The
Okay.
stupid, the dumb sheep.
Are you able to, can you tell me a little bit about the challenges that you're facing?
Well, I clicked on the sheep and so I thought I would be moving the sheep or my cursor. And it says, when I click on it, it says broadcast my cursor, show cursors. And then, okay, and then it has to be followed, which I didn't click. And so then I thought I'd just move my cursor over to the screen, and then you gave me a little blue, kind of like a box.
Are you able to click on the screen and move around?
Well, I've
Like
got, now
click
I'm,
and drag?
no, and I was also, now I'm kind of stuck in this other thing, which is, I don't know what it is.
Could you try leaving and clicking the link again? And then maybe it's an issue with how you joined.
I joined as a visitor.
Okay. Maybe just close out and try joining again, and then we can troubleshoot it together.
Oh,
Okay.
okay, let's see what happens here.
Tom, are you having any technical?
I think I've done it
Challenges.
maybe once or twice, a couple times. I can't see myself. I thought I was visiting sheep, and now I think I might be visiting horse, and I'm not really able to do much.
Not able to do much. Okay.
Is there
Let me
another
see.
visiting horse on there?
I see you. I see visiting horse. I see you moving around.
Okay, I'm not moving my cursor at all.
No? Okay.
Okay.
Hang on a second.
Okay, while you're toying with that, Barry, did you get back in?
No.
No? Okay.
Hey, how do I make this small without leaving to get back to,
Make Zoom small?
yeah.
Do you see in the upper right corner of the meeting a little minimize?
You have to be
Okay.
in Zoom. I can't get into Zoom because there's no internet service here.
There is.
Oh, yeah, okay, that did it. And then,
Oh, there is internet there.
okay. So if I try to join again, I'm not sure if I really signed out.
Wi-Fi, so I joined to that.
You don't need to leave the meeting if you want to just minimize it. Barry, is that helping?
Yeah, I got
Okay.
it now. I thought I was gonna lose you.
Mm.
Okay, so I'm gonna enter as a visitor again. Visitor name.
Okay, I'm gonna check in with Ellen and then come back to you, Tom. Ellen, do you have internet in the room?
Oh, I didn't know there was internet in this room, but I
Okay.
guess there is, so I have to figure it out.
Do you have the meeting packet in front of you, right?
Yeah, the meeting.
As
back,
well?
yeah.
Okay. So if it would be helpful to do some reflection and then maybe come back to the mural when you're able to.
Oh, I have a question, I think, for Dave Peterson.
Okay.
Dave, how would you define forests that are actively managed for climate change? What would be the characteristics of that forest?
I think the primary characteristic would be resistance and resilience to disturbances. So fire, insects, disease, those sorts of things.
Can you be like, if let's just say I'm a forester and I'm managing this, okay, I get thinning, maybe species selection, what else could I do to really ensure resilience to these different issues of climate change?
Yeah, well, you named the two big ones there, which is, take a
Yeah.
look at the species composition, and also stand density management is another one, so that individual trees themselves are more vigorous. I think, we need to do monitoring to track the vigor, track insects, disease, all that sort of thing. And the other thing is diversity. Diversity is almost always our friend with climate change in terms of diversity of species, genotypes, and structures. So those are kind of the big three. I hope
Thank
that.
you. That's
Okay,
very helpful.
Melly, I'm now a shark.
Okay. So I'm sharing my screen, folks. So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, this is how you
Mhm.
zoom in and out. If you're using a mouse with a scroll button in the middle, you can use that to zoom in and out. And then you just click on the screen and drag to move to different goal and objective statements. So are you
Okay.
able to do
I click on the
those
screen.
things?
Yeah, I can use a scroll and I can
Okay.
and I click on the screen and nothing happens.
If you click on the screen, hold down and drag.
I can move the screen.
Like, do you see what does it look like this? If you click and drag on the screen, you can move around.
Wait, I don't see where you are.
I'm sharing.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
you're not in
triangle, so
Zoom,
it's-
sorry.
No, you're-
I'm sharing my screen on Zoom right now, but I just remembered that you minimized it, which is okay.
No, wait, I don't know. Are you Triangle Associates moving around?
Yes, but I'm sharing my screen so that you can see the mural on the
Yeah.
Zoom screen, but I think you minimized it, so you might not be able to see it.
Let me go back here then. See.
Tom, can
Yeah.
I pivot to you for a minute?
I'm trying to, I think I'm typing something. I've got a
Okay.
yellow square under forest management and coordination, and I'm trying to type something in there.
Okay.
Let's try this.
What are you typing,
I
Tom? And I
want
can check.
Okay, identify areas of high fire mapping.
I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. And then if you click on it, so you can see I'm right there, you can make it smaller or bigger, and then you can click in the middle and move it around.
Okay.
Cool. Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, Oliver.
Yes, did I hear that you'll accept comments on these objectives through track changes on a Word document? I guess I hate to be a spoiler, but I at this point in time in my life, I don't like to learn anything new in the digital realm. And so I have a major impediment to learning Mural. And so I'd like to provide my comments just in a Word document. Is that satisfactory?
That's fine, Oliver. Thank you for checking. Yeah, that
So,
works.
Melanie, it's me, the shark again. And oh wait, Russ looks like he's the visiting shark. What the hell? Because I can go on and I can click the shark, which doesn't do anything really, and then
Russ is also a visiting shark. Russ is an orange visiting shark. You're a green visiting shark, Barry. So
oh no, I don't see the green visiting shark on mine.
so
Oh,
are
no, I see
you
the green, but I see the green. Yeah.
are you able to zoom in and then are you able to click and drag the stickies that you see at the bottom of each work area?
Yeah, but they're blue, and when I hit a blue one, can you see it? And it's got a circle, like a blue television screen outline.
Yeah, I see you. Yep.
Overlying. Okay, what's that blue television?
That's if you wanted to add a new objective. So what else do you see on your screen, Barry? Do you see all of the objective statements?
Yeah, I see people zipping around and doing stuff.
So can you just, as an example, go to the first goal under stewardship and land use, which is forest resilience is improved through active forest land stewardship. So if you can see my cursor, you should be able to see where that is.
Stewardship and land use, right? Yeah, I see
Yep.
it.
Okay. So now zoom into one of the objectives.
Okay.
And after you've reviewed it, let's just say that you think that it is good but needs a little bit of revision. So if you look at the bottom, if you see where my cursor is, I've got my cursor on a little yellow dot. I'm moving the yellow dot.
Yep.
And then I'm moving this purple sticky, and I'm going to type my edit into that purple sticky. I just wrote example. Can you see? Can you see? And the purple sticky is right below down here.
Oh, okay, that's it. Okay, let me grab one of these and do the same thing.
Okay, there you go.
Recording in progress.
And then, do I just click on the sticky? I don't have to drag it.
Click and drag it to the objective statement.
Okay.
There you go.
Ooh, do you see that?
I do. Yeah, I see it. It looks good.
No, but what I'm seeing is that we've got four blue dots and 4 squares on top of it, which makes it not very usable.
Oh,
Wait,
I'm not,
wait,
I'm not, s-
I clicked it again and now it went
okay.
away.
Okay, good. All right.
And
So
so,
now you just click in that sticky and
that's,
you can type.
okay, let me just try something.
I have trouble finding.
When I click in the sticky, it throws a pattern of 4 blue circles
Hmm.
around
Oh,
4.
yep. I see what you're saying now. So
Okay,
that just means that you're able to make it bigger or smaller,
okay,
but you don't have to do that. You can just click in there and type.
okay,
So it just is signaling that you've selected it.
okay. I've got a little finger on it, looks like. Okay,
So go ahead and try typing.
and I am typing and nothing's happening.
I see a bunch of Fs.
Okay, oh, I can't see them. Because I got it's because, okay, how do I make it bigger?
So
Scroll?
you see the zoom button is in the bottom right, or use your scroll on your mouse to go in and out.
Okay, I got it. I'm scrolling in. And
And
just
that'll
ignore,
make it easier. Scrolling it, making it bigger will definitely make it easier to
oh, yeah, I can see what I'm
see
doing.
what you're working with.
Okay, and then so I just ignore the blue dots and blue circles.
Yeah, just ignore those. That's if you want to make it bigger or smaller.
Okay, do I just drag on those or something?
Nope, don't touch them unless you want to make it bigger or smaller. But
wanna
you don't
make it-
need to. You can just click in the center of it, type, and then you can also click on the center of it to move it around.
Okay,
Okay, I'm gonna check
Okay.
in with Tom.
okay, it's not working good.
How you doing, Tom?
I'm good. I typed something up. I don't know if it's the right color. I'm trying to maybe create a new objective for forest management and coordination
Okay.
for wildfire spread mapping. So did I do the wrong color, or can I just?
Let me navigate over to where you are. I see it. Nice and big.
Yeah. Like,
That's fine.
okay.
Yeah,
Does it need
that's
to be a
fine.
different color, or can I just shrink it down?
Yeah, you could just go ahead and shrink it down.
All right. I'll
Yeah,
walk
you've
away.
noted new objectives, so that's helpful. Perfect. Thanks, Tom.
You bet.
Okay.
How we doing, Barry?
Well, I think at least I'm in and it's working. And so that's all I'm going to get done today. And when do we have lessons for the digitally impaired?
I am happy to I can even hang on this meeting for another 5 minutes if you want to go through this. I think that
That'd be great.
I think we made a lot of progress. So I see your example in here, so I think it's hopefully it's starting to make sense.
Yeah, and I can scroll to make it. I haven't been able to move it, but
Yeah, okay. We can touch base on that.
okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a cup of coffee.
Okay. We've got 5 more minutes, folks, and then we'll just do a quick wrap and we'll talk about next steps for this process and our next meeting in March and work in between now and then. So go ahead and continue your thinking for the next 5, and then I'll bring everybody back. Tom, is that a hand from earlier, or you have a new question?
I can't even find the screen to drop my hand.
No
Oh,
problem.
yeah,
I
yeah.
will take care of it.
Okay.
I just quit. I couldn't find how to get out of it.
Hey, Melanie, a quick question. This is Carl.
Yeah, go
I
ahead,
was
Carl.
wondering if you as facilitators are going to try to go through these objectives, because there's some of them that seem like they overlap quite a bit, and try to consolidate those into one, and or if you want to try to flag ones that to you look like actions instead of objectives. Like I was just reading one that says change forest practice regulations. That sounds like an action, not an objective. But it might be quicker for the whole group if you folks, knowing what you want, would go through and flag ones that look funny to you.
So Carl, I just want to, and I know folks are working still, but maybe can I answer that in 2 minutes when everybody's back?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Hey, Corey,
Mm-hmm.
based on how Dave defined actively managing for climate change, would you say that all the DNR acres are actively managed for climate change, or some percentage of them are actively
I mean, what
managed?
did he say exactly? He said the number of species and that forests are thinned.
Active monitoring of the stand density, so thinning, diversity of species, genotype, and diversity of the structure, and then species selection based on climate change.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just putting in one of these comments now, as I mentioned in the email to our subcommittee before, our upcoming planting contract that just started, we're planting Douglas fir, western red cedar, western hemlock, red alder, western white pine, and ponderosa pine. Almost every unit will have multiple species in it, and it's always been the case since I've worked at DNR, and I'm going on 20 years. So we've always planted at least 2 species. I was just out on Red Mountain and Kendall, and I counted like 7 tree species in our unit. So I'm not sure where this idea of monoculture, it's overstated.
No,
So
that's okay.
there's definitely a diversity of species across our landscape.
Yeah. Are
And
you guys looking at sequoia at all in some of the higher elevations?
they're doing seed trials. We're involved in multiple different seed trials to look at moving seed sources and different species and stuff. So I'm not directly involved in that, but our silviculture group in Olympia and our Olympic, the OESF, Olympic Experimental State Forest, they're always studying these things, and they're involved. There's co-ops with DNR and industry and all sorts of landowners looking at different species and seed sources to use with regard to climate adaptation. But my understanding so far with like sequoia, I mean, it's just a totally different ecosystem on the northern coast of California, where there's so much moisture from cloud, and
No, I meant more the upper elevation areas, so the colder areas, that it's more akin to upper elevations. As opposed to
you're talking
redwoods.
coastal redwood.
No, I'm not talking about coastal redwood. I'm talking about some of the sequoia that are, I think it's the ones that are more adapted to the upper elevations.
I don't know what species.
Oh,
you
maybe
mean.
I'm
I mean, we don't have any, to my knowledge, I mean, we don't have any native
looked that up.
here.
All right, folks. I'm Corey Ellen. I'm sorry to interrupt. We've got 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we that we
I
wrap
didn't
close to
realize
on
you were-
time.
We know
We were just listening.
I know it's okay. It was interesting
Sorry.
conversation. So I want to first respond to Carl's comment or question, and then pass it off to Kate to wrap us with our next steps. So Carl asked the question of identifying some redundancies and flagging some of the objectives that might be more like actions. And I just, Carl, I wanted to note the framing of the question in us looking at what we want and making recommendations based on that. I just want to be really clear that, the outcome of this is not something that we want or don't want. We really are completely neutral in this process, and our role is really just to help facilitate this process and get you all to a plan, a forest resilience plan that you all feel really good about and feel like reflects your knowledge and expertise, and that we have some collaborative agreement on. So I want to be really clear about that and continue to be really clear about our role in this. And in terms of identifying redundancies, we can definitely help note some of those areas of overlap and make some recommendations for consolidating. But I think what we're trying to do is just really encourage and remind you all of the ownership that you all have and the agency that you all have in this process and in the outcome of it. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass it off to Kate to briefly summarize our next steps.
Thanks, Mel. Great work, everyone, today. Just really briefly, I'll verbally share, and then I'm just sharing this in the chat as well, our action items and homework for you all to work on before our next meeting. So we talked about subcommittees are going to work on reviewing, nominating review committee members by Friday, February 28th, and share those names with the Triangle team. That'll help us start that review process of the plan. Subcommittees are continuing to draft objectives, and we're looking to have those shared with us prior to our next task force meeting. So that's at the latest looking for those by March 3rd so that we can share those in the meeting packet that goes out prior to our March 10th task force meeting. And then I just noted that we will leave this mural up if you all would like to continue to work today or later this week, asking for folks to provide feedback prior to Friday of this week, because that's when subcommittees are going to start meeting again. And I'll just also note, if you were noting things down rather than capturing them in the mural, it would be great if you could share those notes with us via email so that we can plug them into the mural and track them so that everyone has access to that as well. And then just finally, our next task force meeting is March 10th. So we look forward to seeing you all then. Any final thoughts, Melanie?
No, just thanks everybody. And Barry, feel free to stay on for a couple minutes if you want to dive into mural.
Looks like we got a couple hands up.
Russ and then Jen. Yeah, go.
Yeah, I guess briefly, I wanted to see if we could get a schedule or a meeting schedule for all of the subcommittees, because I would like to have the opportunity to kind of step in on a couple of the committees to explain some of my concerns, and I wanted to see if that would be feasible to do.
You mean other subcommittees other than other than the forest management and
Yeah,
coordination. Okay.
that's correct. Yeah.
I will pass that along to Chris, who is the owner of the calendar invites for all of those. So he has all of those dates, and I'll ask him to share those with you.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Jen?
Yeah, I was curious on the mural part as far as leaving it open. Can you send like a link in an email once this goes away? Then, you know, the link kind of goes away. Awesome.
Yeah, and to others who weren't able to join today. All right. Thanks, folks. Carl?
Yeah, good meeting. I think we plowed through objectives pretty good. I've got a clearer idea of the difference between goals, objectives, and actions now. So hopefully everybody else does, and keep poking away at that mural. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, our time is up. All right. Thanks for joining. See you next time around or in a subcommittee.
Thanks, everyone.